Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. What happened to my same-day schedule? It lasted like one day, and here I am behind and adding in a long policy segment. I have issues. No pun intended. All right, we've got a lot to cover today, again, so let's get going. Shout out to our Tier 3 patrons, Peter Park and Shay Meehan, as well as all our other patrons. We would not still be here without your support. Okay, let's start off on some good news. We have two excellent new candidates endorsed by Humanity Forward today. CJ Petersen is running for Iowa's Senate and has a bold plan to reinvest in rural communities. He calls it the Homecomers Initiative, and it includes funding for UBI pilots in Iowa. A former 2016 Bernie staffer, Petersen was actually a Yang delegate on caucus night in Carroll County. One of us, one of us. Then there's Nina Ahmed, an entrepreneur and scientist with a PhD in chemistry, running to become Pennsylvania's Auditor General. She would be the first woman of color selected to statewide office, and she's also a champion of UBI. Let's show them some love, give them some follows, and get their names out there, gang. More good news, Prop 24 just had its first poll, and a whopping 77% of respondents said they are voting yes, and only 11% said they are voting no. Holy Toledo, talk about a win. Looks like California's about to have all the data rights. In Biden news, we got a surprisingly strong commitment the other day on the matter of abortion. Asked at a town hall what he would do if Barrett overturns Roe v. Wade, Biden answered, quote, "The only response would be to pass legislation making Roe a law of the land. That is what I would do," end quote. So there you have it. Of course, that would require the Democrats controlling both houses of Congress, as this has become a deeply partisan issue. In my opinion, it should be passed into law that at least there should be a period of pregnancy in which abortion must be legal in every state in order to avoid violating freedom of religion. Beyond that, states can make their own decisions on where or whether to draw the line. In Trump news, according to a draft report of an investigation by Michael Horowitz, the department's inspector general, Trump's zero-tolerance family separation policy was inefficient, ineffective, and inhumane. That's not a quote, I'm just paraphrasing. People are largely familiar with the separation of children from their parents under Trump's policies. The draft is very clear on the callous attitude designed to scare people away from immigration, including legal asylum. His attorney general of the DOJ at the time said, quote, "We need to take away children. If they care about their kids, don't bring them in. We won't give amnesty to people with kids," end quote. Rosenstein, the deputy AG of the time, went further, saying it did not matter how young the children were. He said that government lawyers should not have refused to prosecute 2 cases simply because the children were barely more than infants. Everyone involved understood that zero tolerance meant that migrant families would be separated and wanted that to happen because they believed it would deter future illegal immigration, Mr. Horowitz wrote. One government prosecutor wrote to his superiors, quote, "We have now heard of us taking breastfeeding defendant mothers away from their infants. I did not believe this until I looked at the duty log," end quote. It wasn't just the inhumanity that was the problem either. The report says, quote, "The department's single-minded focus on increasing prosecutions came at the expense of careful and effective implementation of the policy," end quote. Border Patrol officers missed serious felony cases because they were stretched too thin by zero-tolerance policy requiring them to detain and prosecute all of the misdemeanor illegal entry cases. One Texas prosecutor warned top Justice Department officials in 2018 that sex offenders were released as a result. The marshals were forced to cut back on serving warrants in other cases, saying that when you take away manpower, you can't make a safe arrest. Justice Department officials have repeatedly claimed that they thought the adults would be prosecuted and reunited with their children within hours of being separated, but the Inspector General found a memo informing top officials that sentences for adults ranged from 3 to 14 days, making it all but certain that children would be sent to the custody of officials at the Health and Human Services Department for long periods of time. The Inspector General wrote, quote, "We found no evidence before or after receipt of the memorandum that DOJ leaders sought to expedite the process for completing sentencing in order to facilitate reunification of separated families, end quote. In other words, they knew damn well what was happening. By contrast, Obama prioritized deporting people convicted of serious crimes and recent arrivals. Per his top domestic policy advisor, Cecilia Munoz, quote, "If you're not targeting and focused on people who recently arrived, then the border is effectively open. It is more humane and effective to be removing people who have been here 2 weeks than 20 years, end quote. Trump rejected the policy of focusing on new arrivals and criminals in his single-minded effort to deport as many people as possible, by calling open season on deportation of any and all undocumented immigrants. Trump has pulled resources away from focusing on truly problematic illegals and thrown the immigrant community into chaos with people who have built a life here over decades, afraid to go to their job, place of worship, or anywhere else for fear of ICE raids." As Munoz says, quote, "People are in terror. They're scared of sending their children to school. That is a very, very different dynamic. There are no enforcement priorities in the Trump administration. That's the point. In the Obama administration, there were clear priorities," end quote. This is consistent with Trump's overall approach to governance, which is to say, ignorant, reckless, inhumane, and ineffective. Now that we're familiar with Trump's, this might be a good time to briefly review Biden's immigration policy, which Trump always lies about to make it seem as reckless as his own, only in the opposite direction. So I looked through it and found that it's actually very much in accord with Yang's policy. Here are the points that stuck out to me. It proposes to end funding for the wall, which many experts believe to be a waste of resources, investing instead in better technology at and between points of entry, including cameras, sensors, large-scale X-ray machines, and fixed towers. Double the number of immigration judges, court staff, and interpreters who are currently overloaded. Dramatically increase resources to eliminate asylum claims backlogs. Scrap Trump's zero-tolerance policy, which cages children and deports people who have been otherwise law-abiding, tax-paying citizens for decades, taking away resources from actual threats. Return instead to prosecuting human traffickers, smugglers, and other harmful criminals. Exempt service members and their families from deportation and create a parole process for veterans deported by the Trump administration to reunite them with their families and military colleagues in the U.S. Support entrepreneur incubators targeted toward immigrants, and provide resources to help access business loans, mentoring, and capital. Facilitate statewide efforts to lower barriers to relicense professional degrees and certifications from other countries. Create welcome centers in communities to help new citizens get up to speed via help to find jobs, access services, learn English, and navigate school, healthcare, and other important facets of daily life. Advocate for legislation that creates a clear roadmap to legal status and citizenship for unauthorized immigrants who register, are up to date on their taxes, and have passed a background check. End the mismanagement of the asylum system, which fuels violence and chaos at the border, including Trump's disastrous policy of metering, which limits the number of asylum applicants accepted each day, forcing people seeking asylum to wait on the streets in often dangerous Mexican border towns for weeks before they are permitted to apply, which creates a horrifying ecosystem of violence and exploitation with cartels kidnapping, violently assaulting, and extorting immigrants. End Trump policies that deny protected entry to asylum seekers and expand the existing asylum system. Revitalize the task force on new Americans and boost the economy by prioritizing integration, promoting immigrant entrepreneurship, increasing access to language instruction, financial management, workforce training, guidance on the naturalization process, and promoting civil engagement to help new citizens help their country prosper. Push to repeal extreme anti-immigrant state laws which have the effect of suppressing reports of domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes in immigrant communities. End for-profit detention centers. End prolonged detention and reinvest in a case management program which enables migrants to live in dignity and safety while awaiting their court hearings, and is proven highly effective and far less expensive than detaining families. Support expanding the number of high-skilled visas and eliminating the limits on employment-based visas by country, which create unacceptably long backlogs. We need more high-skilled workers, not less. Work with Congress to prevent exploitation of immigrant workers and U.S. citizens being undercut by employers who don't play by the rules. End the practice of mass prosecution of border crossers without consideration of circumstances. Address the root causes of migration by fostering greater security, economic development, and respect for the rule of law in Central America. Work with Mexico and Canada as partners, not adversaries. Reinstate DACA to protect undocumented immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children, obeyed the law once here, and stayed in school or enlisted in the military. DACA provided young people who passed a background check and application process with temporary work permits and protection from deportation before Trump terminated it, throwing the lives of millions of dreamers into turmoil. Rescind Trump's travel and refugee bans, aka Muslim bans, which hurt our economy, betray our values, serve as a powerful terrorist recruiting tool, and have no proof of making the country safer. Extend U visa protections, which cover undocumented immigrants who are victims of serious crimes, to victims of any workplace violations of federal, state, or local labor law, and ensure that workers on temporary visas are protected and able to exercise American labor rights. Protect sensitive locations from ICE raids, because no one should be afraid to seek medical attention, go to school, work, or place of worship. Increase resources for training and demand transparency and independent oversight of ICE and CBP's activities. Remove unreasonable fees and other roadblocks for green card holders to obtain naturalization and the right to vote. Address the application backlog and assure applications are processed quickly. Whew. Okay, so that's not a full accounting. That's just, I'd guess it's a little over half, but it's the ones that stuck out to me. Those familiar with Yang's immigration policy will note that Biden's includes the vast majority of Yang's, with 3 possible exceptions, which are invest heavily in protecting and renewing the Rio Grande, which serves as a great natural boundary and is currently ecologically struggling, enhance the H-1B visa program and give workers who receive positive reviews from employers the option to remain in the country as permanent residents, and enhance the F-1 visa program and automatically grant any student who graduates with at least a graduate degree a green card. Of course, Biden does massively expand the visa program, so there will be some crossover there. Other than those 3, Biden's policy includes and massively expands on Yang's. I would go so far as to say Biden's immigration policy is far more robust. It definitely contrasts starkly with Trump's ham-fisted approach and focuses instead on evidence-based, humane, and cost-effective measures. It also has a focus on fostering well-adjusted, productive citizens, which ultimately benefits all of society. And I like that he acknowledges cooperation with our neighbors and efforts to decrease the causes of migration in the first place. Moving on to the economy, the Spectator Index reported that the World Bank estimates 115 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty by the end of 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, we knew it was bad, but damn. And you know what would help with that? Well, in UBI news, an incredible new study called the New Leaf Project just released results. 50 homeless people were each given a lump sum of $7,500 unconditionally. Researchers followed these participants as well as a control group who did not receive the money. This is pretty sick when you think about it, by the way. Preliminary results show that, on average, and compared to the control group, those receiving the payment moved into stable housing faster, spent fewer days homeless, retained over $1,000 throughout the year, were twice as food secure, bought clothes for themselves and their kids, and spent 39% less on alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. Moving out of shelters into housing provided stability, reduced the risk of experiencing trauma, improved health, and freed up shelter beds for those in need. What's fantastic about this study is that it not only shows how beneficial cash grants are to the recipients, it measured the effects on the welfare system. By empowering these individuals to meet their own needs, the 50 cash transfer recipients freed up space in shelters, saving the shelter system $8,100 per person over the course of the year. Recall that the cash grant was only for $7,500 per person, meaning that giving homeless people money actually saved taxpayers' money. Talk about a win. How do you argue against getting homeless people back on their feet for less than it costs to let them stay homeless? If you're a rational person, you don't. Bookmark and share this one to the Four Corners gang. Not sure I'd call this next one news exactly, but in terms of democracy reform, Scott linked a pretty funny joke poll from Reddit where people vote between Jesus, Hitler, Biden, Trump, and Bernie to show a case where Hitler would have won by plurality vote, but Jesus wins by ranked choice voting. It's pretty amusing, link below. And finally, here's some voting news you didn't expect. In the most bizarre thing I've seen in a while, a bunch of celebrities got together to make a video informing people about how to avoid making errors on their mail-in ballots. Naked. To be fair, only Sarah Silverman really went all in on the nakedness, but it had the desired effect. The comments are almost as ridiculous, with people saying, "Why are they naked? This is stupid, it won't accomplish anything." Well, bro, you watched it, you commented, you listened, mission accomplished. There's also a lot of partisan hatred because, it's now cool on the right to hate both celebrities and mail-in voting. Some others think it's cringy. The way I see it, these people are trying to save democracy, and if you wouldn't get naked for democracy, you ain't American. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Check out CJ and Nina. Bookmark and share the immigration threads and the cash grant study. Share out the naked ballot ad. Can't hurt, right? Help recruit other organizations to the cause and get everyone to sign the UBI petition. Flood Congress and Trump with calls, tweets, and letters using the Resist Bot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread. And don't forget to Yang Daily.